Tushan, can you hear my voice? Tushan from the panel, can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Harindu Abegunratna, one of the board directors of Slascom. First of all, let me welcome you all to the Digital IT BPM Week 2020, the first of its kind to be launched in Sri Lanka by Slascom in collaboration with the Export Development Board, ICTA, and FITIS with the support of a number of industry partners. So this initiative is a brainchild of the Regional Development Forum of Slascom, through which we hope to engage undergraduates across Sri Lanka. Right, in the past few years, we have conducted similar IT BPM weeks focusing on identified regional universities. However, this is the first digital IT BPM week open to students from all regions. During this week, we'll be having 2 webinars daily through which we will be sharing technical expertise as well as other general industry knowledge to uplift the skills and knowledge of the IT undergraduates, help them to bridge the gap with the industry and drive undergraduates towards entrepreneurial thinking and supporting the digital economy. So without any further ado, let me welcome the first speaker for today, Dinuka Fernando. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Harindu. Thank you very much, Harindu. Today's session is mobile development with React Native. So, good evening, guys. Before moving to this session, I would like to introduce myself. So, I am Dinuka Fernando from 99Next Technologies and currently working as a software engineer, and I'm a coder and I'm a blogger. So you can follow my articles on LinkedIn and Medium as well. So in this session, after end of this session, we are going to ask some questions from you so you can answer it. So then we can offer prize for you if you are answering the right thing. So before further talking, let's go to our presentation. So I will be stopping my video now. So before moving to what is mobile development, so I'll go to this topic with a scenario. So think, I'm hungry now. So what I'm doing is I am simply taking my mobile device and I'm scrolling it and open one of my application which provides by any of the businesses. That means maybe a Uber Eats or Pick Me Foods. So what I'm going to do is I'm selecting a meal for me. That means simply open up the application, then I'm selecting a meal. By selecting this meal, I can confirm it, then I will get response from them. So look how easy our life. So think about 2010 or 2009. If you are going back to 2010, what we have to do is we need to give a phone call for a restaurant. Then we have to ask for a menu. Then what we are doing is we are asking if this meal is available. If this meal is available, I want to get this. But there is no guarantee which I will get this meal as soon as possible. But when it comes to these mobile applications, we know and we will be informed by the application. Once the meal is dispatched and it is on our doorstep, we will be getting notified. So with this exploding popularity of the smartphones and the tablets, and the mobile application development is becoming an increasingly popular medium of software creation. That means every businesses focuses on this mobile development. Why is that? Because in this era that mobile smart devices can carry with humans. That means easily they can spread their businesses by using these mobile applications. So what is this mobile application? What is this? As I mentioned, it is easy our life. So mobile applications can be developed by the mobile developers and any other developers. But what is actually mobile development? Mobile development is act or a process which mobile app is developed for a mobile device. Simply, we can say that the mobile development is creating applications for the specific devices. So, like in the desktop applications, mobile applications also designed using a programming languages. In the desktop application, it uses Java, maybe C Sharp, and also when it comes to mobile applications, we are using some frameworks, languages for build our application. As we all aware that there is two major operating systems in this world, that is in the mobile world. That means iOS and Android. iOS owned by Apple and Android is owned by Google. So this mobile application development, when it comes to mobile application development, businesses focused on those two main operating systems. When we are developing mobile application, we have to focus on the audiences. That means we need to manage, we need to focus on audience, because that we are creating targeting on this audience. So we need to make sure the characteristic, and we need to follow a characteristic that they are using. So after that, we need to choose a better option for develop a mobile application. We cannot do it without a market analysis. That means if you are developing an application for offline with offline functionality, because that means if audiences, most of them are using offline things, if you are using web applications there, it is not working well. That means that application is getting failed. So before we are developing the application, we need to target our audience. So as I mentioned, we need to target our audience, then we need to focus on developing the mobile applications. So there are different type of mobile applications. Simply we can categorize them into native applications and web applications and hybrid applications. So let's have a look one by one of them. What is native applications? These native applications are targeted on two operating systems, as I mentioned earlier, Android and iOS. These applications are developed for two different platforms. That means we need to manage two different source codes. One is for Android and other one is for iOS. So this native applications has the ability to use device specific hardware and software. This is because this native application also written native language which the operating system is used. So as an example, Google owns the Android and Apple owns the iOS. So in the, as I mentioned, the native language iOS used Swift and Objective-C. So we are using Objective-C and Swift to write iOS applications. And when it comes to Android, we are using Java or Kotlin as a programming language for write codes for these Android applications. So this is the basic idea about native applications. So if we are going with pros and cons of the native applications, these native applications are very efficient with the device resources. It offers the most reliable, fastest and responsive experience to the user. And also what I mentioned is these native applications can easily access your hardware and software of your operating system. That means in your mobile, in your platform, that means the mobile device, it has camera and the GPS. if we need to access those things when it comes to mobile application, because we can do scanning and taking photos and uploading it. So we need to take the advantages of from that features as well. So once you borrow a new mobile device, you all know there are some few pre-installed applications like message, phone, and photo gallery. Likewise, there are few pre-installed applications there. That means these applications are written natively. So think that we are writing a native code, native application, and we are deploying it to the App Store or a Play Store, and we are downloading it, we are using it. So you will get the same feeling as the native application which pre-installed. That means you can get a better user experience while using these native applications. When it comes to cons, this native application required experienced developers to handle the platform specific languages. As an example, there are some developers who can be specially build their applications for Android. And then there are some developers who is expert in building iOS applications. When it comes to these native applications, it is very high cost effective. We have to do we have to write two different source codes, and we need to manage those source codes. So for a single application, we are doing same thing for two different platforms. So that means we are duplicating our effort. So so there is higher cost to maintain those platforms. That means think that we are developed application and we have published it, and once we get any bug, we have to do that changes into both Android and iOS. So it is high cost. So this is the basic idea that I can give you about native applications and pros and the cons. So because of these reasons, the developers and the businesses focused on some other way to develop their applications. That means they are focusing on managing this a single application by managing a one single source code. So they are focused on web-based mobile application development. What is this web-based mobile application development is? So web applications behave similar like native applications, but it runs on a web browser. That means you don't need to go to Play Store or iOS App Store. You just need you don't need to download it from there. You don't need to waste your memory or your space in your device. You just need to have simply a browser like Chrome, Safari, or maybe a Firefox. So because of that, it won't take storage from your user device. These web applications are mainly written from the web technologies like JavaScript, CSS, and HTML5. So basically, this application act using the web browser. So if we are talking about pros and cons of these web applications, first let's have a look about pros. These applications are easy to maintain. What does that mean? As I mentioned earlier, in the native applications, we have to manage two different source codes and we need to do the changes for both. But in this case, we just only need to manage one source code. So it is very easy to maintain. Because it's a web-based, there is no need to customize to platform to operating system. That means we don't need to customize our application for Android, and we don't need to customize it for the iOS. So it won't take any space from your device. That simply it runs on the browser. And also the main thing that we don't need to adhere to standard operating systems protocols and don't require approval from the app marketplace. If you are moving to native application development, we are creating a mobile application. and we are publishing that mobile binary to App Store or a Play Store, we need to follow some steps and guidelines. So they are accepting it, then we will be publishing it to Play Store or App Store. But in this case, in this web applications, we don't need to do that. We just simply need to publish it. So when it comes to cons, this entirely application depend on the web browser. This web browser, once we are using this web browser, it is very slower because that we are using that web browser. When it comes to native application, they are using the native features and it won't be any rather giving you a slower. This when it comes to this web application, users use different web browsers. When it comes to different web browsers, they are using different features. When we are using different features on the web browsers, it will be a different user experience for the users. That means some web browsers giving some a different feeling, and other web browsers maybe give the user experience a different feeling. So it is very experience for the users. And these web applications want completely offline. That means if you are working with these web applications, you can't do any offline things. That is because we are using internet. That means this is a web application. Once we are using these web applications, you cannot work offline. That means you can stay in a single page, but you cannot do any actions. That means you cannot refresh your page, you cannot save your actions, you cannot do any actions. So this is the basic idea about web application. So when it comes to these web applications and native applications, there are many pros and cons. So after these issues, these concerns, so the developers have focused on the developers, and the businesses focused on some other way of developing this application, because it want to support for many support for offline functionalities as well. So let's have a, now we have the basic idea about native applications. Then we have the basic idea about web applications. Now we are focusing on hybrid application. So what is this hybrid application? These hybrid applications are combination of native applications and web applications. These hybrid application actually web apps. They looks like native applications. These hybrid applications have responsive design, fast performance, and are able to do function offline. But they are really web apps made to look native. That means we are creating a we are creating these hybrid applications by using web technologies, then we are wrapping it to native components. So the core of this hybrid application is written using web technologies. It is HTML. These web technologies can be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are then encapsulated within a native application. And also, these are web applications, and we need to access our native components like camera and GPS. What we are doing is we can use plugins. There are a lot of plugins that we can apply to these hybrid applications. So you can easily use those plugins to access your native features. So if you are talking about pros and the cons of the hybrid application, this is using a single code base, and it is this application is very economical, because that we don't need to manage two different source codes, and we have to focus on one single code base. And also this application does not need to have a web browser, even though this is written from a web technologies, but we don't need to use any web browsers. As I mentioned, this application can access your device internal APIs by using plugins. So this is very maintainable because we are using one code base. If we have occurred any bug, we just need to change it within a single code line. That means we don't need to focus on Android and the iOS. We just need to look into the single code base. So if you are talking about cons, with comparing it with the native applications, it is very slower with them if you are comparing it, because the native applications directly work with the native codes, and but in here it uses web technologies and we need to wrap it into native components and we need to deploy it. So these are the basic idea about native applications, web applications, and hybrid applications. So you have to choose the right thing when it comes to developing the applications. So you have to focus on your business purposes and your targeted audience. So if you are talking a bit about hybrid frameworks, we can talk about three main frameworks. The one is Xamarin, Ionic, and Flutter. When it comes to Xamarin, it's owned by Microsoft and it's written in C#. It uses native libraries and it covered in the .NET layer for cross-platform application development. The Ionic has a large community support. So it is open, because of that it is open source. Open source, it uses open source SDK. It offers all the functionalities like native mobile development SDKs. As you can see, the Flutter is made by a Google. The Android operating system is also developed by this Google industry. So this Flutter may be a huge, will be doing a huge change in future, because as you all aware that it also created by the Google. That means the operating system also created by the Google, and now the Flutter is also created by the Google. So this Flutter is an efficient mobile UI framework which developed by the Google, and it can craft high quality native interfaces with compatible for Android and iOS. So now we have the idea native, web, and the hybrid applications, and we have a look into some frameworks which uses hybrid application and the pros and the cons of all of these native, web, and the hybrid development. So now it's time to move to React Native. So what is React Native? Learn once, write anywhere. So what is React Native? React Native is an open source mobile application framework, and it is developed and released by Facebook. The first release happens in 2015. So this is a JavaScript framework, and its look and feel like a native application once we have created and deployed it to the Play Store or for an iOS App Store. This React Native actually based on React. So what is React? React is a Facebook's JavaScript library for building user interfaces, but instead of targeting the browsers, it targeting the mobile platforms. So in this case, React Native is handling and managing a one single code base to Android and iOS. So we don't need to worry about the managing two different source codes. And this React Native became a trend in mobile application development because of its performance. So these React Native applications are written using mixture of JavaScripts and XML/SQ markup language, that means JSX. This React Native bridge invokes the native rendering APIs in Objective-C for iOS and for Java to the Android applications. So React Native exposes JavaScript interfaces for platforms API. So you can simply use plugins to access those features like phone, camera, and GPS. You can simply use things that you just need to you just need to download a module for your application. That means the code, then you can import it and you can simply use it. This React Native majorly support iOS and Android. Why do we need to use React Native? It gives optimal performance. This React Native get connected to the native components for both operating systems and generate a code to the native APIs. That means we are writing these applications by using web applications, web technologies, but it wrapped into the native components, and it will be helped to increase the performance, and it will be acting like a native one. So this React Native, once we are using React Native, we can use a single code base. So we can manage this source code for both Android and iOS. So we can reuse this code for Android and iOS. This React Native has large community support because this React Native is an open source. So a lot of developers contributing to this open source resources. So we also can contribute to it. And also, as an example, when it comes to the large community, what will be get for us? That means once we are developing an application and we are stuck in some place, we can get community help to solve that solve that problem. So this is very cost effective because we are handling a single code base rather than writing two different source codes for Android and iOS. And this is supporting for third-party plugins. That means if we want to access our camera or a GPS location, what we are simply doing is we are using those plugins to access those native components. So I think you got the basic idea about what is React Native, how it came to the industry, and why do we need to use this React Native as a mobile application development language or a framework. So now we have the basic idea. So let's move to what is React Native components. What is actually this React Native component? This is the main building blocks of React Native applications. Simply, a component is very basic element in React Native. As an example, think that we are going to build a large application and there is a feature called login. Once we have this kind of features, we have to divide those features into simple components. When it comes to login, there should be forget password, there should be reset password, and there should be change language components. So we are dividing this large login component into simple components. So we can easily manage those components. That means this component act isolated. If there is a bug occurred, what we should do is we have to focus on a single component. When it comes to the React Native components, we can define this component as functional and or a class component. What is this functional component? Functional component means it is a JavaScript plain, it is a plain JavaScript function. That means it accepting properties and it is returning some UI elements and it is renders. And when it comes to class component, it also this class component, when it comes to class component, it extend from the React and it renders and returns some UI components, UI elements. So the main difference between this functional component and the class component, it accesses this life cycle in a different ways. That means functional component hooks use hooks to access the life cycle, but Class component uses directly the life cycle. So when we are come the major different, it is a syntax. So let's move to a component life cycle. If you're moving to component life cycle, we can talk three major things. One is mounting, updating, and unmounting. Think this mounting is a birth of a component. Then this updating is the growth of your component. And unmounting is the death of your component. Once it mounted, it will be this mounting will be happen once. Once the mounting happens, it will be called into constructor. Once this rendering and mounting happen, it immediately invokes component did mount. When it comes to component did mount, you can use API calls in this component did mount, because once this state change inside this component did mount, it will be re-rendering again, it will be mounting again. So this is one of a place that you can use API calls. So when it comes to updating, there should be have some props, set state, and force update. Once we are updating our properties or states, it should be called for a component did update, and it re-rendering again the component. That because we need to show updated values for the users. That means updated UI to the users. So it will be updating is the growth of the component. That means we can simply use this component did update to show or to change our UI effects. So unmounting is the death of the component. I'll get an example. Think that we are using SMS subscription inside our project. So what should we do is, once I get a message, I will be reading that message and I need to unsubscribe it, because if it subscribe all over the application, there may be issues occurred, the performance issues occurred. So I will be unsubscribe it in the component will unmount. So simply this is the basic life cycle of the component in React Native. So we heard about states and the props. So what is actually this state and props? These are types used in React Native. So let's have a look. What is state? So React component have built-in state object. This state object is where you store property values that belongs to the component. As an example, think that I have a page. It is an about page. So in that about page, I have my photo and my name and my email address and my some other details. So I am going to change my name inside that component. What should I do is, I'm changing the component and click save button. Once I click that save button, the UI is re-rendering, but the value is keep in state. If we kill this application and comes back to this application and about page, it will be showing the initial name. That means if I change it to Dinuka Fernando and I will be killing it, but it not showing once I coming back, it show only Dinuka, because we are keeping this state in a single component and it is not stored. So this in general, you should initialize this state in your constructor, and then you can call set state when you change the values of it. So what is this props? Simply the short form of property is called props. The most component can be customized when they are created with different parameters. As an example, I'll get an example like this. I want to change my name and I'll using props to store my values inside a reducers or a redux store. I will be explain these things in next slides. So this is the props. These props are immutable. That means we cannot change it in the future. But when it goes to states, that can be changed in future. So let's discuss about these props and these states. So if you are comparing props and the states, props are immutable and states are mutable. It can be passed down from the parent and passed down from the parent. But when it comes to states is internal. That means it keeps the values inside the component, not in the whole application. These props can make component reusable, and also can be this state can be used when data is going to change within the component. As I mentioned, if we kill the application, this state comes to initial state. But when we are when we are using props, you can simply reuse these properties within your whole application. So now we have the basic idea about React Native components, React Native states, functional components, and class components, and the life cycle. Now we have a look into Redux. So what is Redux? Redux is an open source JavaScript library for managing applications. That means managing application states. It is most commonly used with libraries such as React or Angular for building user interfaces. Simply, it's like a database. So Redux allows you to store your app state in the Redux store. The main components we can talk about in Redux is actions, reducers, and store. So let's have a look about these actions, reducers, and store. So Redux actions are payloads of information that sends data from your component to your Redux store. Simply, I'll get an example. So I have, as I mentioned earlier as an example, so I have an about page. Once I have an about page, I have name to change. So I am changing my name, Dinuka, to Dinuka Fernando. Then I will be passing that values to Redux action. These Redux actions have types. So these types can be used to store it within the Redux store. So I will be explain it in the reducers. So these actions and the reducers are mapped by using types. So as I mentioned, this types property that indicates the type of the action being performed. So I will be moving to Redux reducers. So what is reducers? Reducers specify how the application state changes. So once we are receiving informations from the actions, we are mapping it to the reducers by the types. Then we are changing our states, and it will be helped to update our UIs in any of our component. Actions only describe what happened, but don't describe how the application state changes. A reducer is a pure function that takes a previous state and an action as an argument and return a new state. Simply, it's store the values, and it will be returning new values. It will be updating the current value. So this is the basic idea about Redux reducer. So what is Redux store? A Redux store holds the whole state tree of your application. The only way to change the state inside is to dispatch by using an action. So store is not a class, it is just an object with few methods on it. To create it, you have to pass your root reducing function to create store. Simply, this Redux store is act like a database. You have to keep the changes, the values as a properties inside this tree. So you can use your properties within any of your component. So basically what we are doing is we are storing our properties inside this Redux store. So I will be walk you through a simple example. So I think that React Native component is about page. So I am going to change my name inside this component. So what I'm doing is I'm changing my name for Dinuka Fernando, then I am clicking my save button. So it will be passing this value to actions. So the actions and the reducers are mapped by using types. That means there is a type called, there is a type called update name, and reducers, it also have update name. So these two are mapping by using that type. So we are passing this value to the reducers as a information. By using this type, it will be store that value as a payload or the information. Then these reducers use to store values inside the Redux store. Simply, we are passing values to action, then the action maps with the reducers. Reducers help us to change our state, and also it help us to store that values inside your store. So this is the basic cycle when it comes to React Native to store values. So now we have discussed about what is React Native and the components, then the Redux. Now it's time to move to our first application development. Before developing our application, we need to configure our environment. So for that, we need to follow some steps. First, you have to download Java Development Kit. So basically, you can go to this website and simply you can download this JDK from there. And then you need to install and set up Node.js. You can also simply go to this site, and when you are using Windows, you have to download it for Windows. If you are using Mac, you have to download the compatible version for your Mac OS. So then we need to install React Native CLI because we are going to use React Native framework. So you can go through this documentation, and you just simply need to run this npm code in your terminal. Then the React Native CLI will be installed for your machine globally. Then you have to install Android Studio and Xcode. Android Studio is available for both Windows and the Mac, but Xcode is only available for Mac. So you can go to simply this website, Android developers website, and you can simply just click this Android Studio and you can get that exe file. Then you need to, I think that all of you are not aware about source code editors. So in my case, I'm using VS Code. So I will be going to VS Code, and you can download the VS Code for your machine as well. So then you have to run your emulator. Once you install Android Studio or Xcode, you can simply run your emulators. So if I'll explain how to do that. So if you are install your Android Studio, you just need to simply go to configurations and go to AVD manager, and there are few virtual devices that I have created. And if you want to create a new one, you just need to click create new, and you have to select a hardware, then you have to select a operating system as well, then you can use that emulator as your device. So these are the main thing that we need to focus when it comes to React Native development environmental setup. So now let's have a look basic steps that we need to follow to develop our first applications. So we need to build our first applications. We need to follow a simple 3 steps. You need to run npx react native init command, and you can use any of your project name here, and you can run this code in your terminal. Then you need to run npm install, because that we need to have node modules. The step 3 is we need to run React Native run Android. This code will be initializing your project and up and run your application. So simply I have configured these things and I have run those commands because of the lack of time. So let's move to our demo. So as you can see, this once you completed with your integrations, so this is the basic structure that you can see. As I mentioned earlier, we are managing a single source code, and there is Android and there is iOS. We can simply handle by using this uh, React Native. So today I'm not going to show you how the navigation works. Because of that, I am using the main app.js file to do my presentation, that the demo, and we can have a look in a few minutes. So I want to explain a package JSON as well. Once you are downloading and installing any node modules, you can simply see that on your package JSON dependencies. Think that you are installing a React Native camera plugin. It will be appear here like this as a React Native camera and the version. So let's move to our application. Once you run this React Native run Android, you will be getting a emulator like this, screen like this. This is the first page that you can see once you run the React Native application from the scratch. So I am going to change this for a bit, because that I'm going to use a button to increase the count, and I'm going to show count is changing by 1. Always once I clicking the count button, it will be increasing by 1. So we'll have a look on that. So first I will be removing these styles. Let's go with this scratch, and I have pre-written styles. I'll uncomment it, and then I am going to remove these code lines as well. So I'll remove this one as well. So I'm going to use a functional component. Then we need to have a return state, because we need to return UI elements. Then I need to have a count variable. And I need to have a set count function here. And I will be using useState hook to access React Native Lifecycle, because I am using a functional component. This is the initial value for count. It is 0. So then I'm going to use a view, and I'm going to use style on it. Then I'm going to use another view for my button. Then I'm importing the button here and close the button. Then I will be use on press, because I'm going to press this button. Then I'm going to use arrow function here to call this set state, set count. So inside that, I'm using the initial count value, and I'm going to apply 1 for that to increase the value. So then I'm going to have a title for my button, and it's called count. And I need to display my updated value. So I will be use text here, and the count is, and the value. So if I go to my emulator, now you can see the count button, and the initial state of count is 0. So I'm going to press this count, and it should be 1. As you can see, the value is changes, because that I am passing 1 for that the changing state. And if I click it again, the count is getting the initial state at 1, then it add 1 for this value. So this is the basic idea that I can give you about developing the React Native application, and this is a basic demo that we can do. So if we move back to our presentation, there are a lot of React Native applications that uses in this industry. So the basic, that most famous ones are Facebook Ad Managers, Instagram, and Skype, and Tesla. So there are a lot of things. So this is some of the famous one. So we have came to our end of our session. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to ask a question. So my question is, what is the main difference between class and functional component? If you are using Facebook live stream, please send your questions and answers by using slido.com, by using the event ID that provided here. So if there is any questions and answer, if there is any question, you can ask it from me now. So if you are using Slido, please go to this Slido and use your key here. Then join an existing event, that because we are going to give a prize. Please make sure that you are entering your name and your answer and your email address in here, because we need to contact you for the right person who give the right answer. So let's move to the questions. So someone asked, is React Native is hybrid application development framework like Flutter, Inico, Xamarin? Yes, it is a hybrid mobile application. Then someone asked, where can we get this presentation for future references? You can get it from the panel. What API I need to add in package JSON if I need to integrate Python code machine learning with? Actually, I haven't aware with that much. What is this UI? UI is a user interface. That means once you log into any of the application, you can see a big picture. That means whatever the buttons and the labels or the names you can see, those are there. This is called UI. What is immutable and mutable props means? So props are immutable and state are mutable. You cannot apply this mutable to props. It is belongs with the states. That means you can use that state only within the component, not with the props. So what the difference between three development again? Yes, three, that means it depends. If you are using native ones, you are using Java or Kotlin for Android. If you are using iOS, you are using Swift or Objective C. And when you are using web applications, you are using web technologies like JavaScript. And when it comes to hybrid mobile application, it also uses this JavaScript framework, but it will be converting it to native ones. Can we make apps without Android Studio using React? No, you have to have Android Studio, because you need to have some dependency issues when you are coming to build a React Native application. You need to follow those steps. APKs are native Android, yes, because once we are publishing it to a Play Store, we need to convert the binaries into native ones. So what are the advantages of using Flutter instead of React Native? So the Flutter is also becoming a trend, but most of the things that React Native has a large community now, because it's better to go with React Native once the Flutter is becoming a trend, but it doesn't have a large community still. Can I use notification in hybrid app? Yes. Can I watch videos on YouTube? You need to integrate some modules for that. So code for the Slido is this one. I think you can see it. So we have a lot of questions here. How to remove and install modules from dependencies. You just need to use React module name and you need to put uninstall. That's it. There is a code. How to fix navigation for React Native? You don't need to worry about that. There is a module called React Navigation. You just need to download and import it. What is for Android? Because we are using React Native for build Android. You need to have Android Studio for your Android packages installed inside your machine. Can we get these videos for future references? Yes. When we write the coding, AVD manager is already installed within the Android Studio, so you don't need to separately install it. How can we submit the answers if we are connected via Zoom? So you can simply give your answer via chat, or you can use Slido, but please mention your name and email address. Whether React Native app can be used in browser? No, you cannot do that because it is converted into native one. What is the better, React, Xamarin? React is best. How to retrieve data from Firebase? React Native. You have to integrate modules Firebase. So those are available in the node modules. Is JIT want to mobile development? I think it's better if you are keeping JIT, because you need to manage your source code, and if there is if you are a big project, you need to have those JIT source code management system. So yes, what do we need to learn if you already know the React.js? So simply you can follow the React Native documentation. If you already know React.js, it is very easy to do your development. Yes, are there any emulators that suffice? No, you don't have ability to do your iOS things on Windows. Okay, can I know the question? Yes, when it comes to Expose CLI, it will be giving some extra features for you when you are developing the React Native application. It is helpful when if you are using if you are using Expo, you can simply use React Native cameras as well easily. Can I get the question again? So the question is, what is the main difference between class and the functional component. So so I think it's already we need to wrap up now. I am handing over this session to Tushan. Tushan.
Hi, Dinuka. So thank you so much. So I think it is valuable session, and you'll spend your time and knowledge sharing your knowledge with everyone. So thank you everyone for joining in. So all the questions that all the answers that provided in Slido. So Dinuka, even in the chat, Dinuka will have a look, and we will get in touch. And also looking forward to see you all at 6:30 session. Be a game changer. Personal grooming and etiquette tips to ace your job interview done by Shehan Kumar. So see you at 6:30, and thank you all for joining in.